the separatists, to support the Geneva Agreement, to support the stand down, to give up their weapons and get out of the Ukrainian buildings.
Statement unlikely to go down well with the Russians. They've been doing a bit of finger pointing themselves, saying it's up to the Americans to put pressure on the authorities in Kiev to get them to pull back their forces in eastern Ukraine. We can speak now to the freelance journalist and author Oliver Bonner-in, who joins us live now from Kiev. Just looking at the headlines in the papers here, Oliver, it's all about a region on the brink of war. And I've got the Kiev Post online. Its single word headline is "Escalation." A photograph of armed men with heavy weaponry. Is that the feeling you're getting in Kiev, that it's all escalating?
It's actually very hard to say. This is a war that's largely been played out through the media. I mean, it should be said that the Kiev Post headline the day before, I think, was Kremlin terrorism. So they do like to talk things up. It's actually very hard to tell what's going on. You get these announcements from the Ukrainian government that they've retaken a building, and then journalists get there and discover it hasn't been retaken. You get these announcements from the Russians and the Americans that they've signed some binding agreement, so that the binding agreement makes absolutely no difference at all. It's like a sort of shadow boxing. The Russians, in order to stop the Ukrainians, all the Russians need to do is mobilize a few troops on their side of the border, and the Ukrainians, who know that they're outgunned, outmanned, and out-equipped, just stop what they're doing and run away. It's all very peculiar, and I mean, as I say, I'm in Kiev, so it's very hard to judge exactly what's going on a minute-by-minute basis, because you see these things on social media and these announcements from the two governments that seem to bear absolutely no relation to anything that's happening on the ground.
There is a question of credibility, though, for the authorities in Kiev, because, I mean, clearly they can't let what's happening in eastern Ukraine go. I don't want to use the word unpunished, but they've got to do something.
Well, they are consistently trying to do something, but they're in this very difficult situation whereby their own soldiers, reasonably enough, don't want to shoot at their own people. So all it takes is about half a dozen sort of relatively determined local activists to stand in front of a tank or an APC, and they're going nowhere. So they are in a very tricky situation, and I think everyone has to recognise the astonishing amount of restraint that they've shown over the last 2 months in the face of some really blinding provocation. The Americans certainly seem to have lost patience, and it will be interesting to see what further sanctions are taken. I mean, the sanctions they've taken so far, though they've been widely mocked in the West, and certainly among journalists in the West, have actually had some very interesting consequences, particularly for Russian company finances. The BP's stake in Rosneft, which is a major strategic holding for BP, has lost a value of $1 billion since Russia moved into Crimea. The total number of deals that Russian companies are doing to raise money on international capital markets are about 13 times smaller than they were this time last year. And I mean, these consequences, they don't play out in public view like what the Russians are doing by mobilizing troops. They're very hard to put on the television. But behind the scenes in Moscow, officials are surely becoming aware that the Americans actually have an extremely impressive amount of leverage in the long term, which will, when Lavrov talks about this being an expensive mistake by Putin, he knows what he's talking about. This is very expensive indeed.
Okay, thanks for that, Olivier Bollo, live there from Kiev. I mentioned the Kiev Post online, only fair to give also the headline of the Moscow Times, and it is Ukraine turmoil heats up to military action. You're listening to Newsday Live from London. Let's go now to Rio. Fireworks and protests after the funeral of Douglas Rafael da Silva Pereira. The discovery of his body in a slum near the famous Copacabana beach sparked riots this week, the latest violence to affect Brazil. Of course, less than 2 months to go to the start of the Football World Cup.
Well, earlier I caught up with our correspondent in Rio, Julia Kainayo.
The funeral was packed. It was very emotional. About 400 people there, lots of young people, some of them carrying banners. Among the banners, one said that the police are assassins. They were singing in tribute to him, but there was lots of angry chanting for justice and against police. There was a heavy police presence there, and at the end, as lots of the people that attended the funeral marched back to their community in Copacabana, there were clashes on the streets, and police used tear gas against the people there as they had mother, Maria de Fatima Silva, she said she will go to the Amnesty International to ask for help.
This can't go unpunished. He can't become just a statistic. Everybody loved him. This story about him being a criminal is just not true. He's not a delinquent.
When you said that she's going to Amnesty, what exactly is she going to say to, or what exactly does she want this international human rights body to do or say on her behalf?
What she means is that she wants international help for this not to be left unpunished. So she doesn't believe that local authorities will do enough to investigate the case and to treat her son as she believes is right. Authorities here, though, have promised rigorous investigations, and already today several policemen have been interrogated. But the case was a blow to police image at a moment when the state's so-called pacification policy, which aims to regain control over favelas dominated by drug lords, is very fragile. There's been lots of pressure to expand this program before the World Cup, but I spoke to security experts and they fear that the focus has been more on quantity rather than quality, and it takes time to establish relation with the communities. And in the middle of all that, there were people saying there won't be a World Cup, so everything a little bit mixed up. I spoke to Professor Christopher Gaffney, who's a geographer, visiting professor in Rio, and I asked him, has the event become sort of a focal point of all Brazil's social ills?
I think the World Cup is becoming an easy target to kind of not really focus on some of the real issues. And so when people say no vai ter Copa, or there's not going to be a World Cup, no one thinks that there won't be a World Cup. They're saying that you're not going to get away with it that easily. We're going to make it difficult for you to have the World Cup the way you envisioned, because people are realizing they don't have education systems, they don't have healthcare, they don't have security, and the government is providing all of those things for FIFA. And so therein lies the indignation of the people.
Professor Christopher Gaffney, a visiting professor in Rio, and I was speaking to our reporter Julia Canel.
Listening to Newsday with Bono and Julian. Later we'll be going to South Africa, where the end of apartheid has transformed the lives of millions of people. We're here from the largest black middle class of the continent.
In doctorate in chemistry, apartheid, no apartheid would have achieved that. God gave me the brains, but I do not believe that I would have been able to reach the pinnacle of my achievements, because of my achievements, if I wasn't Muslim.
More from him later. You are listening to Newsday on the BBC World Service. Balamaso and Julian Keane. Our top headline today: Washington has said it will not give up on the possibility of peace in the Middle East, despite a breakdown in talks between Israel and Palestinians.
From the Israeli Prime Minister a little later. Let's just bring you some of the stories on the front pages around the world this morning.
Singapore's Straits Times leads with news that the Malaysian government is due to release a report on the missing flight MH370 next week.
South China Morning Post in Hong Kong's got a story on the South Korea ferry disaster. The paper says parents of some of the victims want autopsies to check if their children were still alive inside the submerged vessel, and if they only died because the emergency response was too slow.
India's Hindustan Times is of course full of election coverage, with news that Mumbai recorded its highest voter turnout in more than 2 decades.
Now, 4 of the world's biggest technology firms have settled a lawsuit alleging they conspired to hold down salaries. Our business reporter Rob Young is with us. Flesh it out for us. What's
Talking about Apple, Google, Intel and Adobe, and a class action lawsuit alleged that they had agreed basically not to poach staff from each other. Now the allegation is that they conspired effectively to hold down salaries, prevent their employees from moving to some of the other big Silicon Valley companies, therefore preventing them from getting better jobs, and companies effectively entering into some kind of bidding war over pay. Well, the companies have either denied any involvement in that, or are not saying anything at all, but either way they've decided to pay several $100 million to settle the case.
Which sort of says it all. If there's a settlement, no smoke without fire, there must be evidence somewhere.
Well, there is some interesting evidence in the forms of emails. One of them is from the late Steve Jobs, the former boss of Apple. He got an email from Eric Schmidt, the boss of Google at the time, talking about a guy who'd tried to recruit an Apple employee, saying that this person would be fired. Mr. Jobs forwarded the note on to somebody in his human resources department with a smiley face. There's also another exchange, which according to Reuters, Eric Schmidt responded to another email that such a plan to not poach other staff should only be shared verbally, quote, since I don't want to create a paper trail over which we can be sued later. Of course, the companies have been sued on behalf of 64,000 workers. The lawsuit claimed $3 billion. The companies have settled, say some experts, because had it actually gone to court and this been not gone the company's way, they could have been fined as much as $9 billion. A huge amount of money, even for the very wealthy firms of Silicon Valley.
Companies got very deep pockets. I just wonder to what extent stories like this, in a time of, difficult economic times and recession and so forth, to make companies look bad.
Well, it does make companies look bad because the people of Silicon Valley are very talented individuals. Some of them do claim very big salaries. They are in some ways kind of celebrities when you go to the towns around California. But companies clearly don't want to pay higher salaries, even though these companies are all doing very well. Their share prices are all doing pretty nicely as well. But it perhaps might not come as a surprise to some people. Other companies were asked to be part of this alleged conspiracy to hold down salaries, and they said, we're not going to take part, it's probably illegal.
Okay, thanks for that. Rob Young there.
Now let's get the latest sports headlines with Hannah Davis.
Thanks, Bola. The Portuguese champions Benfica have the advantage in the Europa League semi-finals as they beat Juventus 2-1 in Lisbon on Thursday, and Sevilla take a 2-0 lead into the second leg after their match against Valencia. Head of UEFA, Michel Platini, says clubs who break the new financial fair play rules won't be banned from playing in European competitions. And US swimmer Michael Phelps makes a successful return to the swimming pool as he comes out of retirement.
Thanks for that. Hannah Davis with a roundup of some of the top sports headlines of the day. More to come from Hannah a little later, especially on that European football and that successful return of Phelps in the pool. You're with Newsday here on the BBC World Service.
This is Newsday. Now, when it comes to the Middle East, the only certainty is that reaching any sort of deal between the Israelis and Palestinians is never easy. But it's just got even more complicated.
The problem, the unity deal reached between the two main Palestinian factions, Hamas and Fatah. It's ended their 7-year rift, but it's also closed the door on any talks with the Israelis, who refuse to have anything to do with Hamas and have suspended the negotiations with the Palestinians. So what happens now? Our Middle East editor Jeremy Bowen asked the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu.
It depends on President Abbas. He made a decision. Instead of choosing to embrace peace with Israel, he made a pact with Hamas, a terror organization committed to Israel's destruction. He can have peace with Israel or a pact with Hamas. He can't have both.
Under what circumstances would you speak again with President Abbas's group of Palestinians?
When they decide to abandon the course of terror.
So they have to drop their pact with Hamas.
Absolutely.
To talk to Israeli.
Absolutely. As long as I'm Prime Minister of Israel, I will never negotiate with a Palestinian government that is backed by Hamas terrorists.
Wouldn't it be better for you to be able to speak to a Palestinian side as well, which is united? Because if they ever made a deal with you, they'd be better placed to deliver it.
United for peace? Absolutely. United for terror and the destruction of Israel? No.
But isn't it a fact as well that people negotiate peace and peace deals with their enemies, not with their friends?
Sure.
You're going to have to get over that.
Sure, you make peace with an enemy, but only when your enemy decides to veer away from war and terror. But here's what happened with the Palestinian president. He's run into the arms of the very people who seek not merely not to recognize us, but to annihilate us. That's incompatible with peace.
The fact is, though, that Mr. Abbas does not want to annihilate Israel. He wants to work with Israel. The PLO recognized Israel as a legitimate entity, a legitimate state a long time ago. And the issue of recognizing Israel as a specifically Jewish state, you have 20% Arab population here, is something for them which is a different issue.
Well, I wasn't talking about a Jewish state in the religious sense, but as a nation state of the Jewish people, just as he asked me to recognize the Palestinian state as the nation state of the Palestinian people. But he refused to do that. But what he's done now is something entirely different. You can't talk about peace with Israel and at the same time embrace the people who are set on annihilating Israel. You have to choose.
It's Benjamin Netanyahu speaking to the BBC. So what now with the talks? Hussein Ibish is with the American Task Force on Palestine.
It's the blame game, right? The Palestinians and the Israelis have been playing this for some time, trying to make sure that the other side takes full responsibility for any perceived breakdown in negotiations. Now, the United States doesn't agree that talks have stopped, and of course, because the buck is in the Palestinian court right now, they are saying that they have no intention of stopping negotiations with Israel. Israel is saying they're stopping the negotiations, blaming the Palestinians entirely. We went through this before when Israel refused to release prisoners and announced new settlements in Jerusalem, and we went through this before when Palestinians signed 15 international treaties. So there's a very large sense of deja vu here in that regard, as well as deja vu between Hamas and Fatah, who have signed pretty well the same exact agreement as this, at least twice before, once in Cairo and once in Doha. I think both sides are loath to say no to the United States, and both sides have been trying to make each other look responsible for the breakdown in negotiations. The crucial point is that we still have 5 more days. The United States has not given up on this, and whoever walks away under whatever excuse is going to be their fault. Under such circumstances, my guess is that there will be a formula found to go forward come next Tuesday. The State Department yesterday made it very clear that what any Palestinian government has to accept are 3 things. 1, no violence. 2, recognition of Israel. 3, commitment